This new Fable combat footage gives us the clearest look yet at how the game actually plays moment to moment. Compared to earlier reveals, everything feels more connected, more readable, and more deliberate. What we're seeing now looks less like individual systems being shown in isolation and more like a combat framework that's beginning to function as a whole. Playground described combat as a blend of strength, skill, and will, and this footage is the first time we can clearly see how those three ideas actually come together in practice. Rather than forcing players into a single combat style, the game encourages constant adaptation based on enemy behavior, positioning, and timing. That idea becomes clearer the longer you watch fights play out. Melee, ranged weapons, magic, movement, and enemy reactions all feed into each other. The player isn't committing to one approach and sticking with it. They're responding in real time, shifting between tools as the situation changes. Melee combat sits at the center of that experience. Attacks carry visible weight, enemies react physically to being hit, and pressure builds through stagger and imbalance. That pressure is built through light and heavy attacks chained into fluid combos, which visibly knock enemies off balance and open up opportunities for finishers. You can see enemies being pushed into vulnerable states through sustained offense, successful parries, or clean positioning. When that happens, finisher opportunities appear naturally. That sense of impact is even clearer when heavier weapons come into play. The hammer combat shown emphasizes weight and commitment, with slower swings that visibly stagger enemies and send them reeling on impact. Each strike lands with a sense of force and enemies react accordingly, reinforcing that heavier weapons trade speed for control and disruption. Weapon handling adds to that sense of intention. Dual wielding with a longer main blade paired with a shorter offhand sword changes how engagements flow. Attacks move seamlessly between offense and defense, and movement is often integrated directly into the strikes. It gives melee combat momentum without losing clarity, and it allows the player to stay aggressive without becoming reckless. Movement is where the combat system shows a lot more depth than it first appears. Dodging and evading are not the same action, and the footage makes that distinction clear. The dodge is a fast, short-distance movement used to slip just out of the path of an attack while staying close. In fights against Hobbes, this quick dodge causes enemies to fully commit to swings that miss and sometimes strike other enemies instead. The player doesn't disengage. They stay in control and immediately benefit from the enemy's mistake. Alongside that short dodge, there are two distinct evade actions. One is a backward spinning evade slash that creates space while still dealing damage, and in the same motion allows the player to deflect or parry an attack coming from behind with the offhand weapon. This is a combat-focused maneuver designed for moments when the player is under pressure from multiple directions. The second evade is a wider, flowing, almost dance-like spinning movement that carries the character a much greater distance. This functions as a substitute for a traditional dodge roll. It's used to fully reposition, break away from danger, and reset spacing, especially against larger enemies or wide attacks. The difference in distance and intent between the dodge and these evades shows that movement in Fable's combat is layered, with each option serving a specific purpose. Parrying fits naturally into this system as well. Successful parries are clearly signaled and immediately interrupt enemy attacks. What stands out is that parries aren't limited to smaller humanoid enemies. Even large creatures like the Cockatrice can be parried, such as its pecking attack. When this happens, the enemy is briefly staggered, creating an opening for counterattacks or continued pressure. Ranged combat flows into all of this without pulling the player out of the action. Bows and crossbows remain viable even at close range, including direct melee strikes with the weapon itself. This avoids the usual problem of ranged weapons feeling useless once enemies close the distance. More importantly, a leg shot can knock an enemy to the ground, immediately opening the door to a finisher. Magic reinforces the idea of will without overpowering the rest of the system. The spell wheel limits how many spells can be equipped at once, and each slot is represented by a clear icon that communicates its function visually. One icon shows 3 floating blades, which directly corresponds to the summoned sword spell we see used to finish enemies when they're vulnerable. Another icon represents lightning, and in combat this spell strikes repeatedly, dealing damage over a short duration and affecting enemies within a small area. A fireball spell is also shown, functioning as a direct magical attack that impacts enemies on contact and adds pushback during active fights. When a spell is used, its icon is grayed out and displays a visible cooldown indicator, making it clear that magic is governed by timing and availability. The way the wheel is presented reinforces the idea that magic is meant to be woven into the flow of combat. Some spells leave lingering effects that extend beyond the initial cast. Enemies transformed by polymorph magic don't immediately return to normal behavior when the spell ends. They remain disoriented for a short time, creating extended openings instead of abrupt state changes. Magic here feels designed to manipulate encounters rather than instantly resolve them. Enemy behavior supports everything else the system is doing. Hobbes attack aggressively in groups, but their commitment can be turned against them through positioning and movement. Larger enemies like the Cockatrice behave very differently. The Cockatrice uses claw-based jump attacks and pecking strikes that can be punished if mistimed. When the player evades a jumping claw attack correctly, the creature can overextend and crash to the ground, creating a clear damage window without relying on warning icons or prompts. These moments come from reading animations and understanding momentum. That consistency carries through to how encounters end. Finishers appear only when enemies are truly vulnerable, and larger creatures receive more bespoke defeat sequences. When the Cockatrice is finally defeated, it burns away instead of collapsing into an awkward corpse, giving the fight a sense of closure that feels intentional and polished. Taken as a whole, this combat footage shows a system with real depth and a clear direction. It looks noticeably smoother than earlier material, with better flow between actions and more readable enemy reactions. There is still polish needed, particularly in animation, refinement, and responsiveness, but the foundation is solid. What's already here rewards awareness, timing, and creative decision-making, which is exactly what Fable's combat needs to feel both modern and true to its identity. If you're excited about Fable or still on the fence, let me know what you think about the combat in the comments and what you'd like to see before release. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.